Now, if you've been feeling like the air quality in Gauteng has somewhat deteriorated, you may not be wrong. It seems the air quality in the province may need some improvement. But are we worse off than Mpumalanga, which is home to some coal-fired power plants? Let's now speak to Professor Roelof Burger, who is with the Environmental Sciences Unit and the Northwest University. Prof, good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. I'm hoping you can tell us that things are improving, although somewhat when we walk around, it does feel like things are not really going well when it comes to the air quality. So let's talk about Gauteng now having the least amount of clean air days. Is that true, and why?
Well, we must, good evening, Bongiwe. We must remember that this is a function of where we measure. And we measure mostly in Gauteng, where the largest population live, which is actually something that we want to do. But it also speaks to something else. When we've done some studies looking at monitoring sites scattered around South Africa. And when you do that, you will find that the monitoring values close to industry is not necessarily the worst air quality. You find worst air quality in the dense, low-income areas all around South Africa. And of course, Gauteng has the most of these.
So how accurate, then, would you say, is this measurement?
Well, it's fairly accurate. Our government has a large number of these regulatory monitoring sites, and they do a fair job of keeping them running so we can trust these values. And the large picture that is emerging is that air quality is not great for at least 50% of South Africa's population.
So I'm listening to you speak about, the monitoring in different areas. So does this mean then that if you monitor, for example, as you've described for us, this one area where we might see maybe big industries, etc., is it the same for the entire province, or does the picture change according to different areas?
The picture changed dramatically. You have to remember that typically these large industry, especially our power stations, have very tall stacks. So although they emit a lot of pollution, those pollution gets put into the atmosphere 200-300 meters above the ground. So by the time it reaches the monitoring sites, it has diluted quite a lot. Conversely, if you go into a dense area where there's lots of people, there's lots of different activities, maybe there's lack of services like waste collection and people are burning waste, there's dust. All of these things then contribute to a lot worse air quality. Even though the level of the emissions might be lower, there are lots more of these different kind of emissions.
Now, what becomes the impact of that on one's health, for example?
Well, this is quite surprising. When we look at the impact of air pollution on health, you will find that it is the highest environmental risk factor. So of all the things in the world that's trying to kill you, the one that you don't have control over in the environment, air quality is number one. And our estimates are that it is in the order of 4 to 5% of GDP, the cost to the economy, which is almost double the size of the agricultural sector.
Prof, so is there a way that, for example, I as an individual who may be living in this area that you've just described, and I really do feel that it's detrimental to my health, is there anything I can do at all in order to try and improve the situation, even all on my own?
It is one of those things that it's actually a community problem. Although on one hand, we find that household air pollution or indoor air pollution is another problem, maybe not linked to ambient air quality, but something that you have more control over. And in some of our assessment, especially in poor communities where people rely on solid fuels like coal and wood, indoor air quality is even worse. And in that case, having proper cooking equipments that well sealed, having good chimneys, using cleaner energy, that is the kind of things that you can do to protect your health.
So when it comes into some of the regulations as well, I mean, they are there when it comes to air quality management. Are these enforceable at all in some of these areas?
It is, and one wants to point fingers at government very quickly, but this is one of the most challenging problems for us to fix. It is coined as the original sticky problem.
Sure.
And the reason for that is it's connected to all other problems that we have in South Africa. So, for example, energy. We've spoken about the kind of energy that people use in their houses. As soon as we have energy problems and we change maybe the cost of electricity, we're directly impacting air quality. So government, especially the department that has to focus on air quality, their focus is mostly on industry. But as I mentioned before, when you go and see where people live, there are a lot of other things that also impact on air quality, like, for example, service delivery that sits in a whole other department, or transport, or housing. All these things come together and it creates an unbelievably difficult problem to solve.
Prof, quite an interesting conversation, and I hope you and I get to speak again, because you've really just opened up our minds to something else, because every time we think about the issues of air quality, we think industry, but now you're saying take it back to community level, because that's also where the problem is. But thank you so much for speaking to us about this. Certainly, it does look like we may need to expand this conversation somewhat. Appreciate your time. That is Professor Roelof Burger there, who is with the Environmental Sciences Unit at the Northwest University.